Breaking news right now on CBS News Philadelphia. A jury has just reached a verdict in the embezzlement and conspiracy trial of former labor leader John Dougherty, that is, as well as former union president Brian Burrows. Now, Dougherty has been found guilty on most counts of conspiracy and embezzlement, mostly all guilty verdicts for Dougherty, conspiracy and embezzlement. Burrows also guilty on conspiracy and embezzlement charges as well. Again, this verdict just coming down in front of a packed courtroom there at the federal courthouse in Philadelphia. Today was the third day of deliberations for jurors. They got this case on Tuesday around lunchtime. They had to pore over mounds and mounds of evidence from federal prosecutors. Prosecutors do say that Dougherty, the former leader of the local 98 electricians union, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in union money for personal reasons, about $600,000 between he and others, according to court documents. Now, co-defendant and former union president Brian Burrows is also facing those charges, again now being found guilty on conspiracy and embezzlement charges because he was alleged to have used union money to pay for renovations on his home. Again, no allegations necessary here now. We can say both men have been found guilty on conspiracy and embezzlement charges. 2 years ago, if you'll recall, Dougherty and former city councilman Bobby Heenan were convicted on federal bribery charges. Now, again, this was a packed courtroom. Folks have been following this case very, very closely now for weeks. Our Joe Holden has been inside the courtroom throughout the entirety of this trial, and we know that he is going to bring us more information there from the courthouse in just a moment. This is a live picture now outside of the federal courthouse there along 6th and Market Street in Philadelphia. Not a lot of activity at this moment, but you can only imagine the flurry of activity that will certainly be following this verdict in just a short time as folks pour out of that courtroom. Again, we're waiting to hear any reaction from inside the courtroom. Johnny Dougherty and co-defendant Brian Burrows have all alleged that they have done nothing wrong in this case. They have said that from the beginning. Of course, a jury of their peers has found a very different case here in light of mounds of evidence against both of these men. Again, both of them guilty on conspiracy and embezzlement charges. Again, Johnny Dougherty, Johnny Doc as he's known here in the city of Philadelphia, led Local 98, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Union, for nearly 30 years. He was well known in the city of Philadelphia, ahead of that powerful union here in Philadelphia. We were seeing him, as we have on every day of this trial, walking in or out of the courthouse, again maintaining his innocence from the very beginning, and wondering if he will have an opportunity now that the verdict has been read and he has been found guilty to respond. He is certainly never shied away from cameras when asked how he's feeling about this case, when asked if he has done anything wrong. He has certainly been very open about the fact that he believes he did not, and he has spoken about that openly to the media outside of the federal courthouse there. Of course, our cameras are not allowed inside federal court, just so you know, so everything will have to be told from the eyes of our media partners there, our journalists like Joe Holden, who's been following this case from the very beginning. He can talk to us a bit more, again, about the reaction from all involved in this case, from the defense attorneys to the prosecutors, and their response to these guilty verdicts here today. So again, looking live here outside of the federal courthouse there in Center City, Philadelphia. No activity just yet. But again, we are seeing some folks going in and out, but we'll have to wait and see if the lawyers will be addressing the media just now on the heels of these guilty verdicts. So usually that has been the case and will likely be the case in something as high profile as this, that both sides will want to talk to the media, will want to give some reaction to these verdicts. Again, the defense tried to prove that this was not the case, that these men were not doing anything wrong, not using union money in any illegal way. Prosecutors, of course, have now convinced a jury of 12 that clearly they did, and they believe they were using, obviously, union money for personal gain and for personal expenses. So again, we are awaiting some reaction from Joe Holden there, this verdict just being read. And I'm certain that they're still, buttoning things up in a sense inside that courtroom. Not exactly sure also in a case like this if both of these defendants, John Dougherty and Brian Burrows, will be taken into custody immediately. that could very well be the case, or else they could possibly leave and go home, on bond that they've already been on and have to come back to report to prison at a later date. So that, of course, is something else. We'll have to wait and see how that all unfolds here in light of this guilty verdict here. But we are looking at some of the defendants going in or out of the courtroom throughout this trial. Again, no activity just yet. Waiting to hear from Joe Holden, who's been following this case from the very beginning. Again, former Local 98 leader John Dougherty accused of embezzling more than $600,000 from the powerful union. He and others were accused. We understand that 5 people took a plea deal. These 2 men, John Dougherty and Brian Burrows, went to trial, did not take a plea deal, and have ultimately said that they have done nothing wrong despite what they have been accused of. They have continued to maintain their innocence. And we are getting some information here now that prosecutors are asking the judge to revoke John Dougherty's bail. So that is new information that's just into us. As I was just mentioning, in these cases, it could go either way. They could either allow them to continue out on bail and come back for a sentencing or a time that they will come back and ultimately have to report to prison, or they will ultimately just, take their bail away, withdraw their bail, and they would have to go into custody right away in that situation. And it sounds like prosecutors are saying that they want his bail to be revoked in this case, which would mean that he would have to immediately go to prison in light of this guilty verdict here. So we do have, again, Joe Holden following this story very closely for us. He is well versed in what's happening there in the courthouse, and we're going to stay on top of this story, hear from him. Coming up, we'll have much more on this breaking news also ahead on CBS News Philadelphia.